Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you've come via YouTube and want to know more about what we do, it's easy. Head on over to officehours.global. That's our primary web portal for more information and links about the show. And if you want to get in quick and have easy access, because remember, this show is driven by your questions. So if you want the simplest way to put them in, over right here is a QR code. You can simply shoot that. It'll take you right into one part of the Mukana interface where you can add your questions in. Now, that is kind of a quick and easy way to get your questions in. It is a little bit different from full-scale joining Mukana and being part of the community there, and that's really fun because you can discuss the questions, and there's just a robust community of people who watch the show and hang out there. But if you just want to get a quick question in, the QR code you're seeing right here will do that. So shoot it with your phone or whatever else you have that reads QR codes and participate.
And you can go ahead. You can also
Alex.
do askofficehours.com. So if the QR code isn't working for you, or you're watching this on a phone, of course, just go to askofficehours.com, and that's open 24/7. So you can ask these questions, these general questions, any time of the day, and we will bring them in each morning to add them to the show.
And today in our second hour, we're going to be having a roundtable discussion of how to use various forms of business communication. And with this panel, you'll definitely want to stay tuned for some great ideas about maybe what are the platforms or processes to do that. That's our second hour right now. What's our first question for today, Jason?
John Preto in Las Vegas, Nevada writes in, I have something to share that I believe the community would find interesting. For example, it's hardware related.
Interesting. I'm in the wrong place. So yes, there we go. John Preto. John, take it away.
So the boys at PTZ Optics knew I was level 3 certified Dante. I also took the AV exam, which is one of the electives. And they sent me this guy to test out. This is the Link, brand new Link 4K. So 4K, it's got a smaller sensor. It's a 1/1/8 sensor on it. But this is the 20X optical zoom camera. And it has, there's 3 flavors of Dante AV. There's the Ultra, then there's A, and then there's H. And this runs on H, which is H.264 standard. So a lot of the cameras out there that already have H.264 can implement the software version of Dante into their cameras. And then if you've already got Dante set up in your network, it's super easy to add this as another device. It just shows up into the controller, and then you patch it in. And the one challenge is Dante Studio today only runs on a PC. So you have to have a PC with an NVIDIA card to run Studio, and then you patch it in. Then you could feed that video into directly. If you run Studio, it shows up as a web camera directly in OBS or Zoom or anything else. Picture quality it looks really, really good. It's way better. I have the original 20X. It's no comparison. Color science is better. Low light performance is better. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm still testing it out within my network, but I'm really happy with this. And Dante AV network it is really simple and to set up if you're a Dante house.
Have they suggested a suggested retail price yet, John? Do you know what?
$2,800 for this guy.
Okay, there you go. New player, Alex.
That's all I was going to ask, is what the price was. So $2,800. Yeah.
All right, there we go. Jeffrey Powers, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. I actually have the Move because I run NDI in my shop, and it's the same sensor, same everything in there. The one thing about the Link that you do have to remember when you go to purchase, there is an NDI version and there is a Dante version. I found that out at Infocom, so make sure that you're getting the right one.
There you go. Well, some more continued improvement in the equipment we use for these shows and for other things. Let's go to next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, what software tools could be useful to integrate lighting and video with music? I've heard of Resolume as a common tool used for that task.
Alex.
I mean, typically it's just separate pieces of software. Resolume does allow you to do some of that integration, but Resolume's really, there's a lot of things that Resolume does, and it's not really specifically designed to make that actually happen. But what you're really talking about is being able to organize cues. So Isadora does that kind of thing, so There's a lot of other tools in that area that will do that, but Isadora is one of them that they use for theaters. Resolume is going to do the projection. It can send out those cues, and then you simply via something like OSC. So Resolume can do that, and then you can send that out to, and also QLab. These are all things that can send out the commands that are required. Then you have a lighting board like an ETC to get those cues and then send them out to the lights. So when you're integrating it, you're still typically integrating the lighting with some kind of lighting board. You can do it without that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
John Preto.
I'm a Resolume owner. Resolume is the name of the company, and Arena and Avenue are the name of the products. It's mostly used in the DJ world for fancy, integration of lights. I use it for projection mapping on my house. So for Christmas and Halloween, I use Resolume Arena.
That's what I thought. When I heard about this, there is a whole subclass of performers out there who do VJ work. That's kind of a video jockey as opposed to a disc jockey handling only the music part of things. And they often have packages that are specific to VJ. So if you want to just search on VJ software, you might find some more additional information. Alex, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it's funny. I always think of Arena is the only thing we ever use from Resolume, so we tend to think of it that way. But Arena has definitely expanded past just DJs. I think it's really where its roots are. But we see it in a lot of events being used for a variety of different, blending different screens together and organizing those displays. We should get those guys on. I mean, I think it'd be a really good thing for people to see.
I think it's a big vertical out there, and I think a lot of people are interested in it. So I would definitely support that. Let's move to the next question.
John Fisher in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma writes in, when repurposing Mac computers to act as dedicated single-task machines, would you only consider Apple Silicon machines at this point? Is there a reason not to consider older Intel-based Macs?
And this is going to generate some discussion. Nigel Dessau, you're going to start us off here.
Yeah, I think it's really not the age of the Mac, it's the age of the operating system I would worry about. And first of all, does the app you want to run, does the latest version or a version good enough for you run on that machine? Is that machine connected to the internet, in which case you want to be very sensitive about which versions of old operating systems you connect to the internet and what else you have on that machine. And so to me anyway, it's really about the operating system level you need rather than the machine. If the machine is working fine and the app works fine on it, keep using it.
Jesse Kester.
Also something to consider is that RAM makes, if the single purpose is rendering, which is what we use all of our older single purpose Macs for, RAM makes a huge difference, and the older Macs are easier to upgrade RAM than the new ones, which are just south of impossible.
Jeffrey Powers.
Excuse me. So I have a 2011 MacBook Pro behind me that I installed NDI and am using it without a problem. Hook up a joystick to it, and that could actually be a joystick controller from there. I have a 2017 that I'm still using for many different functions, and of course, the 2017 is going to be supported in the next operating system as well. So there is still a lot, and so that makes it a little bit cheaper. Plus, with older versions, you can still connect up that GPU unit and run a lot of the things that you used to run. And sometimes it's nice to have that old FireWire capture card that you might have in the cupboard hooked up to that computer for just something that you absolutely need a single capture of some sort.
Jason Bache.
I'm with Nigel. If it needs to be logged into iCloud, then it needs to be running something that is current and currently secured. If it is connecting to the internet, then it needs to be secured accordingly. If it is just designed to be off in the vacuum of space somewhere, this really just comes down to a question of longevity. If you need it to do this for the next several years, then think carefully about what would be involved with doing it again. Other than that, go for it.
Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes in Bronx, New York writes in, started learning Photoshop and the teacher had us change some defaults, toolbox to do columns, turn on zoom with scroll wheel, etc. Should I ignore these and use the default interface to see what works best for me, or follow along so I can best keep up?
John Preto, what say you?
I would say try everything and find out what you're comfortable with. I use the 2-column icons on the side. I don't know about the zoom on the scroll wheel or not. It's a tool. Just play around with it, see what you like best, and then move forward.
Alex.
Yeah, I think that your teacher's used to the older version of Photoshop, so they probably have it set that way. The old version of Photoshop had 2 rows, and the new one, the new layout. When I say new, probably the last 5 or 10 years. But Photoshop was 2 rows for the first 25 years, and it's been 1 row for the last 10 years or whatever, 8 years. So a lot of us would switch to the 2 rows almost immediately. I find the 1 row to be extremely annoying, but I don't know really whether it's annoying in itself or whether I'm just an old user that can't learn a new trick. So that's it's kind of an unknown there, but that's probably why they probably just use it for a long time and have an opinion that one is better than the other. But if you started from the ground up, you might find that it's just fine.
Chris Fenwick.
I would like to plug joining the show and joining the panel because we read your question early this morning, Jeffrey, and it sparked this really interesting conversation. We went through the Wikipedia for After Effects for Photoshop and talking about what features were released at what time and what versions and when we first used it. I did not know that the scroll wheel could zoom in Photoshop until I read your question, and I immediately went and dug in and found it, and I'm going to say I'm going to start using that feature. I think that's pretty cool.
There you go, Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, and 2 things to remember, because I'm using the beta of the new Photoshop with generative fill. That's going to add more features that will add more preferences as well and new screens. And then, of course, every time that you reset your Photoshop, it will reset all those settings. You'll have to remember what you had set up. So always keep a good idea as to how to get into those preferences, because we were scrolling through those preferences and I was having a hard time trying to find some of those options.
Next question.
Andre Dolay in Berlin writes in, for an upcoming event, I need to stream 3 parallel streams with different audio to YouTube and generate 3 iframes for the customer's website. What service is recommended? We have a Vimeo Pro account, but that would give me only 2 parallel streams.
Alex, can you help him out?
Yeah, I mean, what you really want to do is look at the possibility of how do you uplink or how do you get to an encoder. We use hardware encoders for this. But what you can do is pack all the languages onto into one video frame. So if you have something that can manage more than just 2 channels, so this isn't just doing individual uplinks, but typically the way we handle this is we'll take an elemental link. We will pump in 1 SDI signal with up to 16 channels. The little link only does 8 channels, but that's for 4 stereo languages or 4 stereo independent audio feeds would be possible with that. So you'd have the pairs. All of them are bound together. They all go up to AWS. In AWS, you can set multiple out points to YouTube, and then there you go. Like you've got at least 3 of those in stereo. Now, a lot of times it just depends on whether you have a stereo show or not. If you don't have a stereo show, you could put the first 2 as stereo English, and then have 6 other languages. So there's I know that some folks do as many as 14 languages on top of the original stereo pair. And all those go up, and it's just easiest to get it up there. We have hardware encoders, some larger elementals that we use, that will do the same thing. It'll look at those, and what we're doing is building separate, in each one of those encodes, we just say the first one takes pair 1, the second one takes pair 2, and you turn the other channels off. You do need to test it a lot. So you can accidentally get too many channels or get them mixed and matched. But if you test it a lot, you should find that that's just a turnkey solution. Again, we use the elemental links for that. We also use larger elemental encoders for the same thing. So I don't have a lot of experience with using software to do that. But that is those are the ways that we've done it in the past, and we've done it quite a few times very successfully.
Perfect. Next question.
Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California writes in, is there a good way to help volunteers who switch cameras to do better with paying attention to shot angles, timing, etc.? Note, currently they are managing a PTZ and 1 camera person. They are taking and calling shots.
Let's start with Jesse Kester. Jesse?
The best way to do this is to be on comms during the show and giving them live feedback on their shots and cuts as they're happening. Second best would be to sit down to record the actual edit as you're doing it, and then afterwards sit down with your team and watch it and discuss the shots and how they could be improved. And the third best way is to record the show and upload it to something like Frame.io, where people can give feedback as they watch it individually.
Liberty White.
I love that Frame IO reference. I've done production, volunteered at church and Buckhead Church, and a lot of churches now have, while they're volunteer run, but they've leveled up their production a lot. And what has been tremendous for me as a volunteer, but also our teams, like Jesse said, is the after part, like looking at actually going through it and talking through and showing them what worked, what didn't, and how to, and even modeling. So one of my points, even like actually, whether that be a volunteer day or having some kind of event or experience where you're actually, because sometimes it's like some course correction as well. So just depending on their levels, helping them there. Sharing, I don't know if there's a resource or like a communication channel alluding to our second hour where volunteers get access to materials. So if it's not necessarily on that day, but then now really helping them getting into the thought process of how to create these shots and having a channel or resource where you're sharing that information so they can get that as well. And then the last one being just mentoring, so that having someone who they are either paired with or partnered with to help them with that outside of the shot calling.
And Alex.
Yeah, so I bring up a lot of live crews, oftentimes overseas. Many of them are the students that I have in Rwanda and in other volunteer situations. And the way that we do it right now is it takes me about 4 hours to get the camera operators up to speed. Like when I say this, this is what this means. When I say this, this is what this means. And you kind of talk through what those things are with folks. And I oftentimes are working with people who have very little, like hours of camera operation experience. And so I just explain, like when I say I want more nose room, I want this. If I want, I want to give them a little more space in the back, I want this. If I want a head and shoulder shot, it looks like this. And we talk through all of those things and then we practice them. So the first hour is me kind of explaining things, or the kind of things we try to simplify the cameras and let them explain it. Then after that, I direct the show. So I cut the show. The first couple shows, I'm going to cut the show myself. I'm going to call the show, ready camera one, camera. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the pace. I'm saying, this is how this sounds to look at it. The next step after that is I'm going to sit on comms with them, or I'm going to sit behind them and I'm going to call the show, but have my TD cut it. They're going to get the use of the feel of the board and the rhythm of what we're doing. And then at that point, we hand it off to them. And, so there's a little bit of I find that if you just hand it off to them and try to give them feedback, it's really hard. This is what I'm just describing to you is the fastest way to get them up to speed. Within a couple shows, they're usually going at 70-80% of what you were doing for these are relatively simple shows. So that's the thing. I don't usually give people coaching unless something really is going wrong or something needs to be handled. I tend not to coach people during a show. So I tend to it's kind of like, now if they're doing something horribly wrong, then I take on. But if they're going a little slow or they're not taking the angles that I want, it's really easy to get people into their head, and once they get into this thing where they don't know what they should do next and they get into this unknown area, then you just might as well just call the show. It's not going to, you can decide I'm going to take over the show and call it, but I wouldn't give them feedback on it. If they're not doing a good job, just take over and tell them what to do next, because you're basically doing that if you're giving them feedback during the show. And we just see the highest number of mistakes is when we're trying to push them some other direction. And we find that with clients too. When they push us to do things, it's just people will very quickly get to a point where they kind of disengage control and ownership. And once they do that, it's really hard to get a good show out of them. So those are the way that we, again, training the camera operators, then doing it yourself, then handing it on, then directing the show, and then letting them run the show. And we've been really successful, especially in Rwanda, making that happen.
It is time for me to mention questions and the fact that your questions, as always, drive this show. So if you have questions for anyone on the panel, remember you can use the regular Mukana system. You can also put it in using the QR code down here in the corner. That will get you popped right into the pre-question thing, and those questions are migrated over. We also allow both first and second hour questions. And in our second hour, we're talking about business communications today, all sorts of things. What platforms do you use? Are you doing it through Slack or whatever? Those kind of discussions will be our second hour. So let's get to our next question. Jason?
John Fisher in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma writes in, taking on a digital signage/information display project for a nonprofit client. I like DAC board, but is there a good alternative that doesn't carry a monthly cost?
Jason Bache, start us out.
You got it. Okay, have I got a solution for you? Poster booking. This works really, really well, and I don't believe there's a monthly cost until you get into a whole tonnage of signs. McDonald's uses this. This is a big and robust thing that works on Raspberry Pis, Fire Sticks, Android. You can even use it and drive it from a touchscreen tablet, and as simple as LG's WebOS, something that I would never let on the internet, but that's how flexible it can be.
Sounds really interesting. Alex?
Yeah, and so Jason's is probably the right answer for you. The other ones to look at, which may have some cost to them, is playsignage.com and Sedna. Sedna is, these are both based on some conversations I had with Phil Lenger, who manages a lot of the screens in Times Square. so those are the two that he suggested. I think Sedna does have a yearly cost of like $350 a year, and playsignage.com I'm not sure of, but those are the two that came up in that conversation. I'd recommend taking a look at them as well, just to know what your options are.
Next question.
Tyler Roberts in Chambersburg writes in, has anyone tried this solution for mixing on a Yamaha CL, QL, and Rivage? I don't know, console, and it's innovatestudio.co.uk, and it's the PanLab console.
Alex?
This looks amazing. So we'll get we'll put a note. We're going to put a pin in this one to bring them on for one of the audio days. So what it looks like it does is a little like the controls that we saw last week. It allows you to, it's using the pan tools internally in these things to basically, it takes that over and is able to move things in more of a 3D space. And it looks really powerful. I've never thought of doing what it's doing, by the software, basically using what's built into the mixer, but giving it the capability of doing object-based immersive audio. Definitely want to check it out. So stay tuned for more of that. I hadn't seen it before you asked, but we're definitely going to take a look at it because it looks like a really cool piece of software.
Sounds exciting. Let's go to next question.
Kyle Heyman in Chicago, Illinois writes in, I'm seeing more chatter amongst friends about the U.S. total eclipse in 2024. When will the office hours, after hours coverage planning begin?
Oh, we're such nerds. You can tell there's been a lot of back channel chatter about this already. Alex, your thoughts?
Soon. We've been talking about it on some of the shows. We'll probably put out a call to action within the next month so that people can start to plan. We have to figure out where we're going to do it. We're threatening to do it in a couple locations in succession. So something in Texas, something in Indiana, possibly something in Erie, those kinds of things. It goes through those cities. But if you're interested, just keep your eyes open. We're going to do a call to action so we know who's where and who's on the spine of that eclipse. The eclipse is April 8th of 2024. So it's it's right before NAB, which is a little hard for us, but it once in a lifetime. This is a 4.5 minute eclipse, which the total eclipse time is 4.5 minutes, I believe, which is 3 times more than at least what I saw for the last eclipse that went the other direction across the United States. And I got to tell you, that minute and a half was amazing. And I will definitely be somewhere underneath that spine on April 8th, even if it's cloudy. And if it's cloudy, I might move somewhere else, but it's worth seeing. It's a really amazing experience, and we're hoping to cover it. My thought of having a couple locations is also to spread out our risk, that if we don't get clouds on one place, we don't get clouds in all of them. So we're going to kind of take a look at that. So stay tuned for more.
Sounds very exciting. So something to look forward to for the office hours teams and community. Next question.
Well, Walhouse in Austin, Texas writes in, what's the difference between a YouTube show that grows slowly and one that is an instant sensation?
Liberty White, start us off.
Paul, I wish you were on the panel today because there's so much I feel like there's so much more to unpack with this to do justice, but I'll go ahead and try. And I'm going to do it from the reverse. When you think about a YouTube show that possibly has like instantaneous, like their go viral. Some of them, it could be a handful of videos that relies on timing. So just either when they put the content out, the relevance of what they're talking about, because if you're talking about the news topic of the day and you've got great content, then yes, you will most likely, the algorithm will love you because people are looking and searching for that content. But then it's also fundamentally the consistency. So a show that grows slowly over time, that's the consistency of putting out the content, building the audience and the community. And one of the questions I had for you, feel free to put it in the chat, is it's also dependent on your content. Like, what's the message or the niche? Because if you're a niche audience, that could take longer, but you are growing slowly, but you are growing because you're providing value. So to just recap, I would say that it's a matter of consistency, timing, relevance, and then just the distribution, meaning the community that you're able to build around it.
Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to double down on that. There's a great word called zeitgeist, which Google used to use for a name of one of its conferences, that I think is really the key thing here which is you have to be of the moment of time where it's something that's being discussed. That if you can intersect with what, as you know, we talked about in terms of people are Googling for or searching or something, if you are in the moment and your podcast is of that moment and is touching that nerve, then you stand the opportunity to get a huge market. The difference between now is getting a huge market and keeping a huge market, which is when Liberty's conversation about consistency and quality, I think, really matter. I think the third thing for me is that the presenter or the voice of this thing has to be one that works for the audience that is watching it. I watch some very strange podcast things, and the things that on YouTube, and things that appeal to me typically are around the presenter has found a way of touching something that makes it work for me. So those are the three things for me.
Jesse Kester.
I would be cautious about believing the myth of the instant sensation. Many of those are quite a long time in the making. And the ones that do grow very quickly, understand that there's a very concerted effort behind the scenes to make that growth happen across multiple platforms and a very coordinated strategy for instant growth.
They make it look easy. That doesn't mean it necessarily is easy. Jeffrey Powers.
Excuse me. One thing that's said is that you do not, if you're starting a YouTube channel, the one thing you don't want is your first couple videos, one of those first couple videos to be viral, unless you're able to rinse and repeat that process. Because all of a sudden you have one that spikes and then everything else that dips down, which really can affect some of the stats that in going forward on there. The one thing that a lot of YouTubers do is they go through the analytics and they fine tooth comb it, and they see where people are coming in, where people are going out, what they like, what they don't like, where the comments are coming from. So, and there are some groups out there that are analyzing all of that and then sending that back. So it's a paid service, so you know what to do on your next video. And it's really about being able to where you're planning to go from there. I've seen everything from, like the package, the glitter bomb video. Rober, he made that, and then he took a year off, if I remember correct, on his videos, or he took a long time off, and then he made the next one. Now I think he's making some more strategic moves on his videos from there. But I've seen it where somebody has one video and as a sensation if they brought the audience in from Instagram or another group as well, or then people that just kind of they're taking their time, they can't dedicate weekly or whatever to get to the next level, but they slowly do. I've been doing my YouTube channel for over 15 years and I've got a pretty good audience, but it's not as spectacular as some of these other YouTubers out there because they put a lot of time and days into their videos.
Chris Fenwick.
Yeah. The other thing to think about is instant success can really change your life. We had an editor that we were very comfortable working with at the beginning of COVID, Alan Seawright. And like a couple of months into COVID, he's like, dude, I can't work for you anymore. I go, why? And he goes, well, we started this YouTube channel and it literally blew up in his face. Like it was an instant success. It's called cinema therapy. And Alan is a filmmaker and his friend is a therapist. And they look at topics in movies and sort of deconstruct it. It's a neat idea. But Alan's life overnight completely changed from being a, budding filmmaker, editor that we would hire. He's like, no, dude, I'm now all of a sudden a YouTuber. And all of his income now comes from YouTube. And it changed like over the course of about 2 months. His life flipped upside down. He's happy, but it can change things really quickly.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy either. Liberty, thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back and kind of highlight what has been shared with that the difference between slow growth is you can manage it. You can manage when you put content out, your frequency, and once that, like that instantaneous success and how that impacts your mental health. So just putting that out there, like your capacity for that. So that's a key thing that differentiates slow growth and instantaneous growth.
Alex, another thought?
A lot. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of YouTubers, a lot of times, and even I have always recommended doing something regular. We do something very regular here, but a lot of YouTubers have been finding that as they discuss, in some of the circles that I'm in, discuss it that not necessarily every week. Some of them, like Mark Rober is a good example. He does them when he's good and ready. So other folks have really slowed down their production. The thing that you can do is that the thing to think about is that if you start bringing on staff, if you start getting a lot of people going and you grow really fast, there's a temptation to try to take advantage of the moment, but now you have overhead. And that overhead, you saw what happens with Linus Tech Tips, where that overhead takes over. You have to keep on trying to build a nut. I mean, I think that Linus Tech Tips has 100 employees or 80 employees or something like that. And you're trying to now, and I can tell you as someone who had to make $500,000 a month, it's a grind, and you sit there, not on YouTube, but on production, it's a grind to suddenly have, you stop thinking about creativity or production. All you think about is payroll, and so you just want to be careful of making sure that whatever you do here, it's sustainable by you for a little while you make that decision, and you can slow that rate down a little bit. And do that. And you might, are you going to make as much money? No, but maybe you'll take home more of that money, and you might have less overhead where you can kind of flex in and out. But I think that no matter how big, if I don't have a big YouTube channel, but no matter how big that channel got, I'd probably take it slow, of how productive I am and make sure that it's good, good stuff. But it also just takes a lot of time, so I think that Marquez Brownlee had the best, the first 100 videos, you're going to get 10 views. So just keep that in mind.
Well, yeah. And just in terms of personal growth for you, if you own this channel, all of a sudden you're going to be in a lot more meetings with a lot more people dealing with accounting and legal and all these things. And that may not have been your passion, but suddenly this is the point. It's a bigger deal now.
The other thing is to know where you want to go with it. I've had friends who've had big viral things, and they suddenly, as Bill said, brought immediately into Hollywood and other things to have meetings, and they just didn't know what they wanted to do next because they hadn't thought about that. They just put out they were just trying to do the videos. So having some ideas pre-cooked before you do anything that you think is going to go really viral is also a good thing to do.
Chris Fenwick, you had a last comment before we move on?
Yeah, what Alex was just saying, it's kind of like the curse of a rock and roll band and their second album. The first album is based on your whole life up until that album is released. And the second album is about how hard life is touring on a tour bus, because that's all, because you're drawing from so little. So success built up over time has gravitas to it because it has that time. And all of a sudden, Alan and his buddy, and I can't remember his name, now they got to churn out these great cinema therapy episodes once a week. They're doing a pretty good job, though. Anyway.
Yeah. That reminds me of the phrase one hit wonder. The reason it exists is that sometimes that spark of magic is just random and it happens. Then can you convert into a long-term career of growth and stability? Hard to do in a lot of cases. So good question, Paul. Thanks. Let's move on to the next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida writes in, do you think that the OBSBot Tail Air might be a solution to capture conference presenters in a small breakout session? And
Jeffrey
then
Powers.
OBSBot.com. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Jeffrey. Jeffrey's got one.
This one right here. So what this is, for those of you who don't know, it's just basically the OBSBot Tiny 2, except now it's got a battery, it's got HDMI on it, it's got NDI on it. You can do RTSP on it, so you can actually have this as a wireless camera for a conference setting. I did do some tests outdoors. It's not the greatest of audios, but it does do a really good job when it's up close and even about 4 or 5 feet away from that. Once again, I probably wouldn't set this in on a conference unless I absolutely needed to, and I could actually run my own audio, which you can definitely do because there is a 3.5 millimeter jack on here. But what this will excel in a conference room is being able to move over to the person that's actually, or the part of the table that's actually talking, and capture it from there. Other than that, if you don't need to have the wireless aspect, the Tiny 2 is going to do exactly the same thing as this one.
Nicely done. Thank you very much. And if my mouse is in the right place, we're going to the next question.
Brian Carney in Wheaton, Illinois writes in, looking to freshen up my Premiere transition plugins, obviously more subtle and not gaudy, i.e. blur wipes. Also, anything specific for bringing text on and off the screen?
Alex.
I prefer subtle. So that's the thing is that I think that, and Chris is probably someone also that can talk about that as you start to think about text coming on. The thing that probably annoys me the most is when people want to do all kinds of crazy stuff with their lower thirds and everything else, or other things. It's just keeping it clean and moving through. Unless you're really, really good at it and you're going to spend a lot of time making it great, keep it simple. Dissolve in, dissolve out, sweep in, sweep out, not overly fast. Those are all things that it's, there's the saying, it's better to keep one's mouth shut and look foolish than to open it and remove all doubt. So you're just going to kind of not overplay your hand. So just really think about how you can just do things very simply if you're not going to, unless you really have the chops to make it complicated, and almost never does that work.
Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, I totally agree. So think about this, Brian. Everything you do on screen should have meaning and purpose. And if you live and die by that, you'll probably do a pretty good job. So quite often we'll do something because we can, and just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so it's interesting when like a new plugin comes out, all of a sudden you start seeing like that. It's like, like what is the meaning and purpose behind that transition? Does it fit the branding of the company or the project that you're working on? That's a good question to ask. I remember very early in my career trying to make everything have like a really cool background and a great shadow, and like I was trying to throw so much on the screen, and I was looking at stuff coming in from the biggest clients I was working for, and the vast majority of stuff that I was seeing was like white text on a black background. And I remember thinking once, I was like, why do these art directors make so much money? Like, what do? They go, wait, I have an idea. It's going to be great. Here we go. White text on black. And all of a sudden the guy walks away with 6 figures, right? And so, but meaning and purpose, does it add to the show? Is it making it better? Does it distract from what you're trying to do? And that's why so much stuff ends up being very simple, because all I needed to do is know who's talking. I don't need to know how many plugins you have or how long you've been working in Premiere. I just need to know who's talking. Just tell me who's talking. Remind me who he works for. That's all I care about. So ask yourself that. Is what I'm doing have meaning and purpose?
Jason Beish.
Yeah, to summarize, more is not better. It's just more.
Yeah, and from my experience in the advertising world, that one line of white text on black might have taken 15 meetings and a lot of discussions about typeface size, and 35 other things to get down to that simple expression that was exactly right. Alex, you had a note?
Sorry. Last night I spent 5 hours making sure everything was right for a countdown clock. And it was just adding some text that counted down for 2 minutes.
And the art directors, I know that's exactly where they live.
It wasn't even an art director. It was just me sitting there, just making sure that. But there was nothing complicated about what I was doing. It was all about these little. I've got to transition from something that's looping to something that is a countdown. I have to have how is this going to disappear and how this is going to appear, and all that time was not spent on anything crazy. It was spent on the timing of the blink that I had to do and how it was going to transition to this thing. And all of it was dissolves in very simple little animations. It was just figuring out all the little details, making sure that all the points were just right and the distances and all the bits and pieces. It's worth it, I think. But yeah, that's where you want to spend time, is those little details, not the crazy stuff.
Chris, can you quick follow up?
Really quickly. So Alex, you're saying that you were changing the timing of the blink. Were you redefining time?
Yeah,
the timing of the
exactly.
blink. What?
Yeah, no.
It's going to have cosmic implications.
You have taken this career to a whole new level. It's like, I've decided 1 second is way too long. 29 frames, way too much. Everything's 27 from now. Because you know why? Because 29 drives me crazy.
Well,
it's got to be 27.
One of the best things, not in this one. This one was very precise as far, because I get into a lot of precision.
Never, ever be 29, 27, or I'm going crazy.
The funny thing is some of the best countdown clocks out there, not for speaker timers. So the best speaker timers have an adjustable speed. And so just this little, I shouldn't tell speakers that, because I shouldn't put this on the show, because then you'll be worried. But we turn that speed up just a little bit, and that helps the speaker get done on time. So just, if you turn it up too fast, they just ignore it and they decide it's broken.
No one would ever do that to you, Mr. Speaker or Ms. Speaker. No one would ever do that. So just relax.
If you're listening, you ever work with me, I would never do that to you. I would never speak to speakers.
All right. We are at the time when I need to say, thank you for being here. Your questions are what drives this show always. So please get into the question queue. We have room for questions. Also, the second hour should be fascinating today. So if you have questions for the second hour, tag them with that. There's a tagging system in there. And if you really want a quick access, I always do that with my wrong hand. There is the QR code for doing that. Let's move on to the next question. And Nigel, I'm sorry.
Billy B. in Portland, Oregon writes in, what is the preferred method for adding lower third graphics, or perhaps 16 of them, to a live stream using A10 Mini Pro, not the extreme version, 2 cameras, and a live view solo HDMI? Thanks.
Jesse Kessler is going to start us out. Jesse?
If you want a little bit of animation, what I would do is dedicate one of your HDMI ins to some Keynote on an iPad, and you build slight animations with no motion blur or transparency, and you do like a Luma key, and you make your background absolute black, and then you make your lower thirds not absolute black, and that's how you can get animation in. If you want to do something simpler, what I would recommend is loading your lower thirds into your ATEM software controller as PNGs with transparency, and building macros, or using a Stream Deck. I do it with macros, but you really want to test those macros before you go live.
Jeffrey Powers.
So it really depends on whether you want clean feed out of that ATEM Mini Pro or not, and if you're using the USB-C cable to actually record your individual frames. What I would most likely do is, because I don't want to have those lower thirds, I don't want to have those graphics onto the video when I'm doing the recording, but then of course the final recording I would do. So what I would do is I would take the display out and I'd make it into the clean feed for there. That would then go into a computer using something like OBS, Wirecast, vMix, whatever. And then some of them have graphics in there. And of course, so you can also port in other graphics like SPX graphics to use that as the lower third. That would then send out to wherever you go. Of course, there's many different hardware solutions if you do it that way as well.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, outside of using the media pool, which was talked about, and Jesse's, I would probably approach it the way Jesse approaches it, which is having a Luma key that's there. You can also use a chroma key. The problem with chroma key is that you're actually dealing now with 422, so you can actually see some jagged edges when you key it. So that's why a lot of people will start with doing green, but really the Luma key will give you more options. It'll be a cleaner around curves or any kind of angled graphics. You can get really subtle there. You can actually have some, if your foreground is bright enough, you can actually get some motion blur. You can do transparency. I did everything out of Keynote for the first 2 or 3 years of live streaming. So we just did all of those things out of there. The other thing that you can do is, remember, with Photoshop has the ability to replace all of those lower thirds in your media pool directly. So it has a direct connection. And what we've done in the past is build scripts that will go do things like go out and look at an Excel file, grab all those files, pull them into Photoshop, generate a whole bunch of new lower thirds, and insert them into the ATEM switcher. And you can just, that way, when you go from session to session to session, or groups of people together, you just hit a button and it just spins up the next version of it. And so there's a lot of ways for you to kind of automate those things as well to make it work a little bit better.
Jason Beish.
Yeah, and with respect to file format, Targa is, I think, the way to do this in a way that it cannot possibly mess up.
I don't know if you can do a Targa with. You mean for the stills?
Yeah, for the stills.
If you're doing
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. If you were doing stills, I would highly recommend using the Photoshop plugin for it. It really works well. Like, you build the Photoshop in Photoshop, you do it with transparency, and then you use the plugin that will automatically install. If Photoshop is installed on your machine, when you install the switcher software will put that plugin. It's not a plugin. I think it's under scripts, but it'll automatically insert it into Photoshop, and you'll see it, to export to Blackmagic there. So I would highly recommend that. And by the way, if you're only using 2 cameras, you could theoretically send key fill to the other 2 inputs into the switcher.
Jason, you had a very quick follow-up?
Yeah, quick follow-up. A longtime friend of the show, John Barker, has H2R Graphics, and that is an excellent place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Next question.
Dylan Anthony in Portland, Oregon writes in, we use LightKey to control LED RGBW DMX pairs to light our small church's stage. The problem is we have to keep the lights powered continuously. If cut the power, the lights lose all the settings and we have to manually set them again. Is this normal?
Yeah, I think he was talking about DMX par cans, which is a particular type of light used a lot in theater. Alex.
Yeah, you don't want the lights to hold on to anything. The lights should be dumb outputs, and you should have a controller. There's iPad controllers. I think one's Lumen is one of the ones that you can get for the iPad, or you can get a small lighting board. Don't have your lights try to hang on to that data. Of course, they definitely will lose that data there. Not all lights will, but obviously yours will. But what a very small lighting board or software, and then what you would need is some kind of IP, using and John can probably suggest some. He's coming right after me, but you need some kind of IP to DMX converter, and then have it done on your iPad, or have a small lighting board that keeps all those settings. Then you'll be able to turn them on and off as needed. But you don't want to try to have a light hang on to its settings. You want to give it to it from an external source all the time. It'll be a lot easier to manage over time.
John Preto.
I use LightKey on my iPad, and I'm using the NTech controller, and I don't have to keep my fixtures on. They're controlled by LightKey through the NTech controller. They work great.
There you go. Let's go to the next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York writes in, at NAB New York, Panasonic showed their auto-tracking PTZ system. It worked, but when pointed at a dark complexion, it failed. Do other brands do any better?
Alex.
No, they don't. This is actually a big challenge. It's the amount of contrast between details that sometimes these cameras have, and it just has to be lit well. And I think that one of the challenges that we find is when we're lighting dark complexions, people will still put really bright backgrounds behind folks with dark complexions, and that really becomes a challenge, because if you put a white background or a very light background behind someone that has dark, you're stuck with that exposure, or it'll blow out. So a lot of times what we tend to do is slightly darker, cool colors. I tend to put cool colors, except for today. I tend to put cool colors behind everyone, most of the time, just because I think it makes the skin look better than warm tones. But then, in addition to that, I try to avoid the top 25% of the exposure, so that I have the headroom that I need to be able to bring people's complexions out. And when you do that, we find that a lot of these auto trackers tend to work pretty well. It's just that they're not getting enough exposure on the subject because the backgrounds are too light.
Thank you. Next question.
Nigel Jasau in Austin, Texas writes in, what is the plan for a watch-along party for the Apple iPhone announcement tomorrow?
Oh, Nigel wants to weigh in on his own question, and it's a great question. So thinking about the announcement?
I have cleared my calendar to listen to Apple redefine, rename, and re-facilitate the USB-C cable into something sexy and new, which is what they're going to have to do. It'll be interesting to see whether they find a use for it they've never seen before. So I will be watching. I don't know where everybody else will be.
Betting on Apple Megapipe. Alex Lindsay.
After hours, we'll be watching it after hours. We've been a little behind on it. Caught up with me. I have a production today, and I didn't put out the announcement, but we will be doing it in after hours tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And it's a second ear experience. So you watch it, put it on some other device or on the same device. You watch it on your own computer, but you'll hear us talking about it with each other. And we don't just talk about the releases. We talk about the cameras, we talk about the backgrounds, we talk about the audio, we talk about all the bits and pieces. So it's a little bit more of a full featured coverage of the coverage. So anyway, but we do that in after hours, and you'll see a room available for that. So definitely come and join us. Usually it's somewhere between 50 and 150 people, depending on the release. And so we'd love to have you there. A couple of us will be chit-chatting about that. And it should be fun. And I think the only thing I want to know is, I'm hoping I'll leave immediately if we don't get the best iPhone ever. Like if they come on, I gotta tell you, the best. Like every year, it's the best. This is the best iPhone ever. I'm just waiting for a year where they just say, hard year. We did the best we could. Yeah, and there's a lot of chip
it's
shortages.
Pretty good.
But it's new. It's got some new features, but I don't know if it's better than last year. That's what I'm waiting for. But no, we'll be jumping on, and we expect to have also another party where we oftentimes just end up in after hours on Friday morning. The typical thing is on Tuesday we'll talk about it. On Friday at 5 a.m. We'll be just starting our coverage of IBC, but some of us will be hammering away at 5 a.m. on Friday to order our new phone. So I wish Apple would just let us order the phone. Like, just say, hey, here's the deal. The top of the line phone is this much money. You can order it before we even announce it. And then there's a whole bunch of us that would just go, okay, that's a lot easier. Get
Click yes or no to auto ship.
Exactly. Exactly. It'd be a lot easier. Chris is mortified.
Chris.
No. If you tune into the after hours, you're going to hear comments like this. You go, oh, did you see that? The shadow underneath his left foot is drifting. I think the Gaussian blur is too much. Yeah. You'll pass these two things. The best. Yeah, you'll hear all that kind of
Otherwise,
stuff.
Otherwise, it's boring. Like, it's not. It's like, I'm sorry, but Apple does the best of anyone because it's all recorded. Because everyone else is way more boring. But if you just I can't sit and watch a whole keynote. I mean, that's
not if it's not at 2x, right? So I'll tell you this. I have something really funny. Literally just last night, a friend of mine texted me. I say this because we have to remember just like how immersed in all this stuff we are. A friend of mine texted me and they go, hey, so I got to buy a couple of phones. I'm wondering, do you know, is there anything coming? And I was like, you're kidding, right? Tuesday, 10 a.m. announcement, brand new phones will be announced. They're like, how do you know? Oh, because I don't live under a rock. That's how I know. They're like, are you sure? And I said, 100%. You're going to get a new phone on Tuesday. So anyway, I thought that was funny.
John Preto.
Chris, let's be honest. You don't have any friends. Anyways, we have a bingo card for tomorrow that we'll be publishing. I use Bingo Baker. We used it for WWDC, and Jonas won the bingo. So I'll have that available for anybody that wants them.
What are some of your squares? Is this for things they say during this,
Color
like
blue,
revolutionary?
color red, best ever is one of the squares.
It sounds
Is that
like
the
a fun
center?
way to
Is
say.
best phone ever the center square?
No.
And I know you're in Vegas. This is not waging. You're not doing like a grid and people are going to buy squares or anything like that.
Oh, let me write that down, Bill. That's a good idea.
Don't forget one more thing.
I've said something horrible.
Apple. It could be Apple roulette.
bingo.
Apple roulette. It's like you have different ones. They put a.
I got 3.16 millimeter bezel. Does that work or not?
And you thought there was no money to be made off of office hours. There you go.
I bet you there's a whole. I bet there's a big chunk of Vegas that's committed to betting on.
Oh my gosh!
On the Apple
of course
keynote.
there is.
There's got to be. I mean, because they bet on everything. So that seems like
How many complaints are posted
What's the
about the
over-under?
nature of the USB-C implementation that Apple did on this
Can
phone?
we move on? Can we go to the next thing?
No,
anything. Like literally anything.
No, absolutely not, Fenwick.
Jason Bache has his hand raised, and we have to take care of Jason. He can go on if he wants.
Please come into the second hour. We may very well drive you nuts. If you need to hear every word, then that might not be the place for you. I, for one, am going to be using H2R graphics, and I'm going to put a hyperbole counter right up here, and it's just going to bing, bing, bing all the way up.
So now I'm in a quandary. Let's very quickly just touch on the next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York writes in, any must-see 9/11 documentaries to watch today? Mine is by the, I'm going to mispronounce it, Nudet brothers. They are already embedded with the FDNY on a different project on the day.
Alex Lindsay, any thoughts about this?
No, that sounds great. I actually haven't seen that one, so I think that might actually be a really interesting one to watch. So maybe we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I have something to do tomorrow, and I saw 9/11, and I thought, wow, it's been a long time. I think it's always good to revisit some of these things that were huge moments. Let's see if we can just touch really quickly on the next one, and then we'll be moving on.
Paul Walhus in Austin, Texas writes in, research, ChatGPT uses an estimated 500 milliliters of water for every 5 to 50 prompts. Microsoft disclosed the company's water use spiked. Should we be concerned?
John Preto, what say you about this?
Paul, we love you. Were you the one that read the National Enquirer at the grocery store? Because those are the same people that are writing these headlines for these tech journals right now.
Is there a connection between water use and the fabs
Cooling.
that do these really? Yeah, that's what I was
cooling,
thinking.
but water follows the laws of conservation. Water doesn't leave the planet. Very little water leaves the planet. And so we don't have a water drought issue. We have a water distribution problem.
Yeah,
I had the hydrologist for NASA on my podcast. It was great. Go listen to that episode, Paul.
Jeffrey Powers, real quick.
So I just asked ChatGPT that question because we have to do that. And it says, concerns about water usage related to AI models like GPT-3, which ChatGPT is based on, are primarily related to the environmental impact training of these models rather than their everyday usage. They talk about the training phase impact, data center cooling, operational phase efficiency, blah, 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 blah. These are a lot of things that any type of system, Facebook, Google, or anything like that is going to be using. So it's just a part of the business.
Absolutely. All righty. Let's see some notes about what's coming up on office hours. Tomorrow, this should be really fascinating. Sketching in 3D, the Feather app. For those of you who are with us for, I believe it was Cinegear. Was it Cinegear or one of the other shows? Anyway, Alex and the field team, Nick, found this app, Feather, a 3D sketching application for pen and touch devices. Everybody got really excited about it. So tomorrow, we are going to talk about that in our second hour. Anybody can create curves in 3D and hand over mesh data and other software from tablet, desktop, mobile. The chief engineer is going to be here along with the community manager. So they will be our guests on the show tomorrow. So that is tomorrow here in the morning on office hours. And just a little bit farther out, I wanted to note Thursday, Alex has a special guest coming in, Calvin Roberts. This really looks fascinating. He's a former paratrooper, and he's done video production on 5 continents, at time in war zones, worked on feature films and more. So if you've ever been interested in extreme video and having to go places and do things that frankly scare most people, Calvin is one of the people who has done that for his whole career. So he should have some fascinating story and be able to help us understand that world. Next up is our second hour in our IBC promo. For those of you who don't know it, we are heading out to IBC. Our coverage will be all kind of revolving around that over the end of this weekend and the first couple of days of next week. We're also going to have a look back at it, I think, the following Thursday. But right now, to give you a little hint about what we're going to be doing, we have a little video for you to watch. Stand by. Welcome back. Our topic is business communications today and all of its aspects. With so many platforms available, I get pinged on Slack, and Discord is more and more used, and some of the more traditional platforms for enabling communication between people in corporate circumstances or just business situations. What are you using for your communication? Today, we're having a roundtable discussion on that. We have an august panel of people who do this kind of thing all the time. And so we're just going to be chatting about whatever forms of communication you find the most facilitus for your communication, what you like to use, what's good and bad about it, and hopefully we can cross-pollinate some ideas. There are a lot of people here in the show who spend a lot of time doing this kind of thing. Most of us have some form of business going on in the background that allows us to have our some free time to do this. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of good ideas. We're going to start this morning with John Preto. Let him chat a little bit, and then we'll go on through some of the other panelists. And then, as always, we'll be open for your questions. So if you have anything about either communications processes that may be fading, that you've been using, but you're thinking they're not really doing the job anymore, what else is out there? Today is your day. John, kick it off for us.
You know, I was reflecting back and trying to remember my first company that we started was 1990, and it was all related and focused around the phone system, which was a KSU, Northern Telecom, right? And so everybody had to have a KSU in their office, and those Northern Telecom phones, and then voicemail. In my last office, we spent a lot of money on VoIP phones, and nobody in my company used their phones on their desk. Everybody used their personal phones, and we communicated mostly on email. And then we had a CRM that we used. Freshdesk was our main form of communication. So I thought that was interesting. So in a 30-year time frame, it really migrated a far distance.
I remember how sophisticated I felt the first time I bought a Merlin system for our desks in an old offices that I was running. I thought, man, I really reached the pinnacle here. It wasn't the pinnacle, but it was also interesting that when I eventually, some years later, migrated out of doing the office thing and did more remote, I made a lot of money on selling that Merlin system at the time. So there are these business communication devices and schemes that rise, become very popular for a while, and then it transitions, and suddenly everybody wants to use Slack or something else. It's just been fascinating to me. Nigel, what are your thoughts?
I guess when I think about the change in the many, many, many decades that I've been working in business, the biggest change is the move from either physical or voice communication to text communication. And it occurs to me it is directly proportional to the amount of which people are misunderstood. There is nothing worse in business communication than short messages to deliver important thoughts. They're not properly read, they're not properly understood, they're not properly interpreted, and almost every debate or fight or challenge I see at work nowadays almost comes out of something someone thinks they read or said in a message. So I would tell you that, well, short communications from Slack to text to any of those things are great for giving updates. They're really, really poor when you need to communicate something clearly or something difficult. I can't tell you the number of times I've had to tell people, pick up the phone, walk down the corridor. go see the person, have a conversation. You are both talking about something and you are missing each other. And you won't solve that, whether it's with a partner, whether it's with a client, whether it's with a supplier. We have a generation that believes that texting and text is a great way to communicate, and it lacks the subtlety and the communication and the physical presence that actually talking to someone does. So I would say that's the biggest change I've seen and the thing that I keep reminding of. The second thought, more quickly, is that if someone doesn't understand something, it's the fault of the communicator, not the fault of the receiver. Typically, you see it when there's a breakdown in communication. Someone says, well, you didn't understand what I said, which really means I didn't say it in a way that you understood it. So if you are trying to communicate with someone, make sure you do it in a way that the person receiving the message gets it, not in the way you want to communicate it.
I just glanced at the panel while Nigel was saying those things, and everybody was just bobbing their heads. I think we've all been there, and that felt very real to our experience. Jason Bass, Liberty, you're right after that.
I need to repeat again what Nigel said. There, you can drive a bus between being impossible to be misunderstood, and to speak clearly. Okay, the two are not the same. They should give this out, like, with a business degree. And one of the very first chapters says effectively that. I also have to bring up one fun little point in this book that my business degree didn't cover, which I found to be true almost by accident. It's one of those perfect moments of synchronicity. And what the headline said was that a one-person business has departments, even if those departments are folders. It's one of those things. And I just turned to that the moment I found the prop, had to bring it up. But yes, Nigel's point is really, really grit is a lot of things in business, not the least of which is making things crystal clear and impossible to misunderstand.
Absolutely. Liberty.
Cosign on everything that everyone has said. I think back to one quick story of the time. It's almost 20 years now when I was working in the state. I was in the interactive team, and on my first day, and this kind of speaks to John saying just how communications has changed. I got BlackBerry. I got a BlackBerry on my first day, and I remember at the end of the day, I called my mom. I was like, "Mommy, I got a phone," and she didn't get that. And I was like, they want to be able to reach me at any time of the day because they gave me a mobile device for that. So, just different organizations now that whether it be phone, whether it be email communications, depending on your role, that speaks to your accessibility and people wanting to reach you. The second thing, and I think I just shared this with someone the other day, is after 2 or 3 emails or text messages and you're still on the same subject matter, that warrants, to Nigel's point, pick up the phone and call, because I'm confident that whatever it is you're talking about, and I get documentation, you can do that after, and I'm sure some questions might come up in the hour of how to create a paper trail and things like that. But after 2 or 3 back and forth on the same subject, you probably could have handled that in a 2-minute, 3-minute phone call, jump on Zoom, whatever that may be. Also wanting to touch on having a hierarchy system. And I'm saying that's not the word that I'm looking for. It is escalation, having some form of escalation communication. So for us, it is typically if something needs to be responded to within a level 1 is just you can email, that's a 24, 48 hour response. A level 2 is, send the email for documentation, but then buzz on our comms channel so that, hey, I just sent you that email, so that the person knows this is something that possibly needs a response or attention in the next 1 to 6 hours. And then anything above that is the pick up the phone and call. Again, you still send the follow-up email or send the email so they see it. But that also helps with just making sure that things are processed on time, that people understand expectation of when you need something responded to. So that's just something that I found extremely valuable, because my priority might not be your priority. But if we understand that as we're communicating, when I do say, hey, this is a level 3, that we're on the same page, and that helps to mitigate issues and problems that might result because of a lack of communication.
Nigel, you wanted to come back in? Please do.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on something Liberty just said, and it's a reminder that all email and all text and all communication, particularly written, is discoverable, which means that once you've sent it, somebody could put it in a court of law. And the only reason I tell you that is you need to stick by the things you commit to, and that becomes a core to your business communication. Every time you write a piece of business communication, you are fundamentally committing to whatever you write in that, particularly to a third-party customer supplier, but increasingly to employees and other people. So be deliberate in your communications, particularly where they're written. Don't just dish them off, because it's quicker to do that than phone. Just remember, you're making a legal bond when you send that message.
Jason, you had a follow-up?
I do. Deliberate is the important part here, and that can also save your butt as well as getting it into the fire. So, keep that in mind too. If you end up with situations that can be wishy-washy, understand that you are creating a permanent record, and that can also potentially help you.
Yeah, and paying attention to, what you're sending out, even if you think it's the clearest thing in the world, it might not be received that way. I had a lot of circumstances. I'll never forget, I had one circumstance on a shoot. I always try to sit down with everybody involved and I say, okay, our goals for making this video are this. We're going to distill it down to the 3 goals. I can definitely accomplish number 1 for you. Number 2, I'll try to get in there as much as I can. Number 3 may, if something's going to go, it's going to be the number 3 goal. So I would ask them to prioritize, so I knew what was important to them. I can't tell you the number of times in dealing with one of the stakeholders in this, they would spend all the time talking about number 3. And I kept saying to myself, am I an idiot for not getting across this idea that 1 is important, 2 is less important, 3. But it turns out that what I didn't understand was that 3 really resonated for them. And they had a lot of ideas about 3. And for them, expressing their ideas and expertise in number 3 was more important for them. And so their attention, redirecting their attention to saying, yeah, 3 is great. Let's get to 3. But if we don't do 1 perfectly, this whole project is in jeopardy. So it's just interesting, the hearing of a message that you thought was clear and how the individual you're passing it off to can be a problem. Liberty, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, something you said, and then also John in the comments was just saying picking the best communication is important for whomever you're speaking to, and I couldn't agree more. Understanding if you lead a team or volunteers, that you want to make sure, like, what's the best way to communicate with them, but then also having something, because some people are audio, they do well listening, and that's how they process information. Some people are visual. Some people need that written detail. So that just being a part of just being effective. So you, as I think that was Nigel who said it before, you as the one who's communicating a thought, an idea, that understanding how best for them to receive it. So it's almost like, and that's one of the wonderful things with Zoom, is like we have the verbal communication of us speaking, you can share screen and have notes, but then now with Zoom having transcripts for those people who, process information differently, that they can get the notes, and always having like recaps, because you have the conversation, you think everybody is on the same page. There were the head nods. People were able to recite it back. And then, something happens between the end of the meeting and the actual execution. So making sure that, just as a tip, like having those recap notes and those action items or whatnot happens next, just since our conversation is about just effective business communications, those are always helpful.
All righty, we're ready to dive into the questions from those of you who want to get in and weigh in on this. The question queue is building constantly. Your questions are most welcome on this topic, and everybody has these problems. Why I think it's going to be pretty universal today. So let's go on to the next question. Jason, what have we got?
Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida writes in, how do you effectively advertise live streaming production services inside a company as the company's production department? Thanks.
Jesse Kester's going to start us off here. Jesse?
The same way you effectively advertise airbags. You drive the car into the brick wall. You're going to have to start doing live streams yourself, and I would do them in private within the company, not broadcasting them and not advertising that you're doing it up the chain until you're pretty darn good at it. And then I would just show them what can be accomplished using live streams to do front-facing corporate communications.
Liberty White.
Depending on the size of the organization, that you may need to show, as Jesse said, like proof of concept or what you're trying to do and how it benefits them. A larger organization where there are more levels or more red tape, that probably warrants walking around and talking to some of the people who are either senior leadership, maybe some other teams, and just explaining and getting some buy-in with them of what you're trying to achieve, learn some of what their goals and what matters to them, the what's in it for me. So what matters to them, so that therein, when you are pitching this, when you are trying to promote it, you have a certain type of voice and communication to this audience because you know that's their language, how they receive it. Then when you're promoting it to this type of audience within the organization, that you know what matters to them. So in this case, like these production services will help get you more leads. That matters to sales and marketing. This production, us doing this in-house, matters to the learning team because we can help reduce the time that you have to develop curriculum. I'm making all of that up because I don't know what your organization that you do, but those are just some of the ways I've seen it. I've had to do it multiple times, not only with clients, but inside an organization where, again, priorities differ. So you want to understand what their priorities are and then let that tie into your priority of like, okay, we have this service, we want to help you.
Nigel.
In all communications at work, practice the behavior you want other people to follow. So if you want people to say, to respond when they've received your email, then respond when you receive their email. And I think that's a sort of rule that you can apply here. So if you want people to use your service, use your service. Find a way to demonstrate to the organization how you could do that. If you're in the IT department, do a weekly office hours, do training, do something. But communication works, particularly new forms of communication work, tend to work in a company where people see it demonstrated and then they'll copy it.
John Preto.
So we've been doing live streaming since 1997. I tell people not to do live streaming because something's going to break, you're not going to do it right, and it's going to be a disaster. The only thing that I've seen work within a corporation is a weekly question and answer. So Midjourney's doing this quite effective. I did this in my last company effectively. I used to get 600 to 800 people watching, and it was 15 minutes of news, and then I would answer questions for about an hour. Midjourney does it every week on Wednesdays. They call it office hours too. And so we found those Q&As to be super useful to our customers.
All right, next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, what are the benefits and dangers in using film scenes or ideas or just notable Bueller dialogue in business communications?
Bueller? Nigel Dessau.
So I think the first thing is you can get a message across really quickly if it's a popular reference that people get. But I will tell you the downside, because there is a clip. So Sports Night, the Aaron Sorkin series, is full of brilliant management advice and brilliant stuff. I love it. It's a very important TV series. If you've never seen it, to me, I love it. And there's particularly a speech in the second series. William H. Macy does it. It's called the Cliff Gardner speech. If you've never seen it, it's probably some of Sorkin's best writing. And I really, really, really wanted to use that with one of the teams in my company, because I thought it really sent a great message, except for the last line. And if they just focused on the last line of the thing, they would miss the point of the other 2 minutes. So I sat down with the leader of that team and I said, does this work? And guess what? He only focused on the last line. So if you're going to do it, practice it, show it, demonstrate it, check it with somebody else. Something that is terribly, terribly meaningful to you and is blindingly obvious to you. What is the thought? What is the motivation? What is the driving thing? Completely miss on somebody else, because the way it will occur to them could be completely different.
Boy, do I support this thinking. I had the same circumstance in one of my videos I was doing for a big client. They wanted to show a fun, lighthearted look at all the ways that things could go wrong. And I didn't talk them out of it, and I should have, because at the end, anybody myelinated into their brain was all the things that can go wrong, and they completely missed all the things that can go right. Attaching this is how you don't do it to humor can completely destroy your successful communication. So, Jason, your thoughts?
I'm reminded today that the people who are signing up for the Army and entering basic training were -6, right? I mean, I have my math right, when September 11th, 2001 happened. Remember your audience. In this case, those people also probably weren't born when Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out in 1985. So it's very easy. There's this bizarre attentional blink which happens, which can alienate your audience. And if your audience is younger than you, they might not have the same affinity and the same emotional connection to the lines that you just take as gospel, because gospel is ephemeral.
There you go. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Not that I ever use ancient and out-of-date references. Jesse Kester?
If you are genetically compelled to do this, allow yourself one per hour-long keynote at most. But please, please spare us all. We know that Austin Powers says, yeah, baby, you don't need to remind us.
And also, it really helps if you have a social circle that you have access to that incorporates a lot of different kinds of people. Because when you see that totally blank look on the 20-something person in the crowd, maybe you realize that you thought everybody knew that, but they don't. Let's go to the next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada writes in, is face-to-face project discussion proven to be more effective than through video, text, email, Slack? Are there studies around on this that I can look for?
Nobody raised their hand in terms of a study that they know directly. I think most of us who have been doing this a long time feel that the interactivity and instantaneousness and the ability to read all the facial and body language cues about a face-to-face meeting always add additional nuance and clarity to person-to-person communication, some of which all get lost when you do something other than that. Video is probably as close to that as anything if it's done well. But Liberty, your thoughts?
I was going to say, but then I just reread it, so we'll see if this lands or not. But there have been studies around having huddles. They used to call them stand-up meetings, but for just being more inclusive, the huddle meetings. So whether you have those at the beginning of the day, and from my awareness, that most people, that is either doing it if you've got a physical location, doing those on site, and or doing those briefly at the start of the day, and those have a great impact. So as a reference, it's not the full out project meeting, but that face-to-face where people are sharing their wins and any challenges that they have, that they find them impactful, if that's helpful.
Jason Beisch.
Alex lent himself right at the beginning of COVID pretty heavily into to helping somebody with a study about this, because of course Zoom fatigue, the zeitgeist of Zoom fatigue, or Zoom fatigue capturing it doesn't matter, but Zoom fatigue became a very quick thing, and it happened almost as quickly as people were aware of Zoom and were still learning how to use Zoom. They were already becoming fatigued about it. I think that regardless of the research that's been done prior to now, if everybody had the wherewithal and the equipment to do learning like office hours, that would not be the case. I don't think that this will ever be definitively proven. It will just simply continue to improve until it is indistinguishable from reality.
Jesse Kester.
This also depends on your modes of communication. For example, I believe that I communicate best face to face. But that only works if everybody in the face-to-face meeting is actually disengaged from video, Slack, email, and their text messaging. Like, everybody has to put down their phones, close up their computers if we're going to have a face-to-face meeting. But depending on your personality type, you might actually be much better at communicating via Zoom or communicating via email. So chase the muse where it leads you.
Here we go. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer writes in, is there a way to send Slack direct messages based on a contact list, much like sending an email list? Our users are far more likely to respond to Slack. Thank you.
We didn't have anybody raise a hand on this either, and I'm a little bit surprised. Slack came into my life when I was working on larger crews. It was a very big part of it for about 2 to 3 seasons of production for me. And then I've never had anybody ask me to use it again. So maybe it's just the kind of work I'm doing now versus what I did right then. I know it is still a huge, robust thing, and it's a platform that a lot of large corporations use as their internal messaging thing. But because I only had limited experience with it, the people who are plumbed into Slack and live and die by it every day, I would think that is probably their primary means of communication in the corporate internal system. And if you're not playing, you're kind of not on anybody's radar. So I think that's one of those things where, depending on what the enterprise has consolidated on as their internal communications and messaging system, you kind of got to play their game if you're in the corporate world. If not, you get to choose. And there are a lot of alternatives now. I just mentioned I spend most of the time on my panelist and thing here in Discord, because we have a robust Discord and it's doing all the functions that I would have expected Slack to be doing before. So things move on, change, and morph. Next question.
Let's see. Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts writes in, what tactics do you find effective to coach others when you see miscommunications without triggering defensive behavior?
Jesse's going to start us off, then Nigel's going to close. Jesse?
I'm going to pull back a little bit and focus on the triggering defensive behavior part of this question. And the best 2 ways that we've found to do this internally is, first of all, we never phrase it as this is my DP or this is my gaffer or something like that on a project. It's always framed as a we, never as an I or a my. And the other thing is, when having communications, especially sensitive internal communications about a project, we do everything we can to not frame it about from the perspective of individuals, but from the perspective of the needs of the project. And this really takes a lot of the weight off of defensive behavior, because the project is a dispassionate third party that we're discussing, and then we pull the conversation from there.
Nigel.
So if this is an area that interests you, I'm going to recommend a book called The 3 Laws of Performance. I've talked about it before, and it really is a very key thought here. And the first law of performance, will really help you in this space. Lots of people think thinking causes action. Thinking does not cause action. What causes action is the way a situation occurs to somebody. Now, we could have a 3-hour discussion about this, but in context of this question, the way I coach people is I would sit down with them and say, how do you think what you said occurred to the person you said it to? So stop thinking about it how you meant to send that communication. Think about how that communication was received. What do you think it meant to that person? How do you think it occurred to them? And the moment you start to think about how that message is received at the other end, you'll change the way communication. By the way, that's the best piece of marriage advice I was ever given, which is at some point in your marriage, your partner or whatever your relationship is going to look at you. And rather than start the fight, you say, how did what I just say occur to you? And they're going to answer it, and you're going to go, well, that's not how I meant it. And thus, many an argument can be settled.
It's all relationships, business, personal, whatever. It's all interhuman. That's very cool. What was the name of that? Let's just double check so people who might have missed it and want to write it down.
It's the three laws of performance, and they're really worth understanding if you want to understand. By the way, the basic thinking behind that was used to settle lots of problems with apartheid. It solved the Northern Ireland peace process. It's a very important way of thinking.
That's pretty powerful. Jesse Kester, you have additional thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because, Nigel, both of our answers were focused around meta-thought, and I do believe that meta-thought is one of the most important foundational buttresses to any interaction that you can have in your entire life. So thank you for bringing up what you said.
Jesse, I'm going to presume you mean thought about how you think about things. Is there any addition you want to add to that, or is that what you're kind of defining as meta thought?
That's exactly what I mean, and he touched on it a little bit at the beginning with the thinking doesn't lead to action, thinking leads to inaction, and that is like a core tenet of meta thought is your brain is based on thinking. So if your brain thinks it, then your brain thinks that its job is done doing what needs to be done about the thing. And that's like one of the biggest glitches that meta thought exposes, in my opinion.
So it's pointing you to analyze your thought reaction and go to a step farther and really look at it from a more overview of how you're doing it. Interesting
What I'm
stuff.
saying is don't trust your brain. It fools you all the time.
My brain? Never. No, not me. Anyway, next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada writes in, what sorts of communication accommodations do we make for people with disabilities?
Jesse Kester.
We make as many as we can as per their advice, as per our request for their advice.
Yeah, I would state it as we just start by acknowledging that everybody has the right to access the same information that everyone else does. And if there's something that's getting in the way of that, you need to make all the accommodations you can to either eliminate or at least dial down those barriers whenever you can. Now, some things are impossible, and everybody understands that. But if there's something that can be done and it doesn't destroy the entire enterprise, there is absolutely no reason not to make your communications as ecumenical, for lack of a better word, as possible. Everybody should have the same access to the same information. It's kind of like, I think it's a pretty fundamental right. Jason Beish?
I think this should be a personal challenge. If you think that explaining something to somebody is impossible, try it. And then try it again and try it again and try it again. Don't be discouraged. This is one of these I won't give up on you if you don't give up on me type things. And I think you'll find that impossible just means I couldn't meta think my way through it before trying it.
Yeah. And for me, it's always just if the person with the disabilities was my brother, mother, sister, daughter, friend, what would I want done for them? And that's usually enough to say, well, yeah, I'd want people to work pretty hard to get all the information to as many people as possible. Let's go to the next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in tech, we often applaud smaller companies who allow all their employees to communicate to end users, but other companies restrict such openness. Any insights on when this works best?
This is a pretty deep subject. Nigel, help us out.
I actually worked for a company that stopped reply to all on its email system because it was a lazy process. I guess I have fairly strict rules about this. In an email system with a all-company distribution list, I restrict who can use that. It's great that people want to respond to, so-and-so did something good, a company email goes out, then everybody wants to reply to that, and everybody wants to say, well done. I think you have to be very careful on written communications that you don't fill people's inbox full of stuff, rubbish that you want them to manage. And so now, when does that happen? Does that happen in a company of 10 people? No, typically not. There's an optimum size of groups, which is about 100. And anything over 100 requires a second level of management control or even a third level of management control around it. So if you're a very small team replying to all, having all communication is fine. But at some point, you're going to hit a level where you're actually doing damage to people's in baskets, you're distracting them, and you should limit it at that point to things you officially need everybody to know.
Jesse Kester.
You can applaud all you want. We aren't doing this. Communications is the spine of every company on the planet, and you need to be able to control those communications with incredible acuity, especially to your users and client base.
Yeah, that's kind of the everybody is now connected. Everybody's on their business platforms. They're also on their social media. And it almost seems to me like we're moving into a world where, in early education, we used to have to talk about, reading, writing, and math, but then eventually home ec and other softer, and I'm not trying to say that's soft necessarily, but I'm just trying to say there isn't much training about those things. And boy, have I noticed that when social media became more and more popular, 20 years ago, there was very little training about how to work this stuff with intent and with wisdom. And I still find myself in little traps because I momentarily forget when I push send in this news group or something. That's going to last forever. And I better be able to be okay with somebody coming back up and saying, well, on this date you said that. Why have you changed? And I better be able to articulate the reason I moved on from that. I think that is way more true in business communication. It's this thing, you want to be personable, but you also want to be precise so you don't get yourself in trouble. It's not a good time for just off the cuff chatting unless you're really good at that. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada writes in, I had good advice when I first started relying on email at work. Was never to put anything in an email which may be read back to you in court. Any other basic communication principles to share?
Yeah, I think that's said much better than I was just trying to articulate something similar. Nigel, what are your rules?
Yeah, 100% with that. I think the other rule, and maybe it fits in with that, is something that Bill just said. Be intentional. In your communications as a leader, be intentional. Be consistent as well. If by your nature and your style, you are humorous, which is always terribly dangerous in communications, people are going to read your style as humorous. If it's one thing or another, be consistent, be intentional, and be regular in your communications.
Jason. Whoops, you're muted, Jason.
There we go. If you are directly above somebody in a corporate hierarchy, they will feel immediately needed to, they will prioritize what you send to them above perhaps their own work. So be very, very careful about wasting their time. If you are the head of an organization, understand that you will very quickly become somebody's top priority, even if you're just wasting time on a Monday afternoon and wanting to update the gang about stuff or motivate or something like that.
Jesse Kester.
Poor communication in any form or media creates extra meetings. And how many extra meetings do you want this week?
Yeah, that might be the poison pill if you can get that idea across to people. I will say also this, because I deal with this a lot. I do a lot of spoken word work, obviously. And we talk a lot about things written for the ear versus written for the eye. And it is tough. I spent most of my early career writing for the eye, and particularly the magazine articles and things like that. But then I started trying to make it more conversational, and I started paying attention to what was written for the ear. They're two different things. And so in the informality of the office, and I say that kind of in quotes and scare quotes, because it has gotten less formal. I mean, fewer people are wearing suits and ties, except in niche industries, and more business casual stuff happens, and then more just toss off a note in the chat to someone happens. And I think you can get kind of seduced into feeling that it's a jeans and polo shirt culture all the time. And in your communications, to the points that Nigel has been making, that can be a little dangerous, because you start thinking you're just chatting with your buddies in the office, and you're really not. You're chatting with everybody in that system. And as he points out so acutely, it's part of the record. So anything you toss off as a quip or a quote or a joke or whatever, when you take away the tonality of the, I was just joking, but you can't read their attitude. You know, you can say it 10 different ways and lighten it a lot by how you say it, but that's not the same as putting it in text and sending it out to somebody. You don't have any clue how it's going to land. Jesse?
For jokes, leave them out of professional communications, of mass communications and emails entirely. If you have a killer joke that you need to send to someone on the team, do it via direct message and make sure that it is a joke that lifts up and not pulls down.
Amen to that. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, what about books or stories like Who Moved My Cheese and their use to instill a company culture of communication?
Nigel.
Yeah, I know lots of companies that pick, a book or a story or something and use that for the basis of cultural stuff. I recently used Turn That Ship Around to do exactly that in a specific situation. I know other people, Five Laws of Dysfunction, some of those books. And you can create a company culture or fix something in your culture around using those. But my advice is do it sparingly. That if you start, once a month, hey, I read one or two of these books every month. If once a month you stand up and say, hey, here's the new thought, it's just going to disappear. So if there is something absolutely germane to the situation you're in, I really needed to solve a problem around moving decision-making down the organization, which is why Turn the Ship Around was so useful. And I'm still using that a couple of years later as the force behind it. If you find that you do read a lot of books and there is a group around you that get interested in that, start a book club, start a reading group, and that can often at work, you'll do that. But once you've found one of these thoughts, try and be consistent with it. Try and stick with it. Don't deluge people with too many of these ideas.
Jason Beige?
I find immediate irony in the concept of putting 100 pages of reading in front of somebody in order to foster a system of communication. That to me is inherently backwards. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. So, throwing a book at somebody is throwing the book at somebody. It feels like the worst possible thing. That said, I really liked Principles by Ray Dalio.
Well, I will say, because you brought up Who Moved Their Cheese, and so that was a thing that happened, 20, 30 years ago? I can't remember exactly when it was. I know I was in the corporate office space at that point and everybody was talking about it. The nice thing about it is it was about change management, and so many companies at that time were being kind of reinvented, and there was tremendous amounts of fear and confusion among all levels of organizations about, will we be merged, acquired, is my job safe, and the rest of that. So that little metaphorical fairy tale for all of, it was just mice and cheese and why isn't it the same as it was yesterday and I'm stressed out, did a pretty good job of framing the issue for management to say, look, things are going to be different. We will help you manage this, but you must confront that things are going to be different. So and by simplifying it into that kind of storybook, fairy tale, animated little, not animated necessarily, but just little character things, it took all the sting. We're not talking about you person or whatever. We're looking at a group of mice trying to do something with cheese. I thought it was pretty effective back then. And there's been other companies who have tried to take these overall lessons and find a way to personalize and kind of publicize the ideas so that it can go top to bottom in an organization and everybody can read it and at least understand what the company's thinking about. It was an interesting era that I won't soon forget. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael writes in, do you think that RTO is as... Oh, wait a minute. David Brady writes in, how can one influence management for a team to adopt a vision, mission, and value statement without upsetting management's ego?
Okay. Jesse Kester.
You kind of painted us into an impossible corner here because it sounds like you're trying to influence the vision, the mission, and the value statement, which was a very, very top-down view of the company, without like there's a bit of ego attached to this, and you're trying to not upset upper management's ego, even though you're trying to change trying to influence the entire shape of the company. To pull back from that impossible corner a little bit, I think the trick is to give upper management credit, whether they deserve it or not. That's the best way to help stubborn egos along the way. And as long as the project is moving forward productively and in the direction you want to go, does it really matter who gets credit for this verbiage on that vision statement?
Nigel?
Yeah, like Jesse, I think you've set an impossible task. If your senior management either are not consistent with the vision of mission or won't update it or change it or even produce one, there's relatively little you're going to do to fix that. Maybe the more interesting question is, why are they not doing it? What is the context that would make them not want to make those changes, not want to stick by them? There's probably something else going on you don't know about that hasn't got to you, and that might be the core of this. As someone who spends my life helping people write visions and missions, they are very difficult to do. They are very difficult to get right. And invariably, they take many iterations. So that may just be that they're working on the next one and they're iterating it because there's a lot of selling and understanding. And the perfect vision and mission can take years to get right.
Jason?
I'm reminded of Hamilton, got to be in the room where it happened. You might not be in the room where it happens unless you're going to hoist a little pirate flag up outside of your office. You might be too far disconnected from this. And if what you're saying is falling on deaf ears, it's probably because they are intentionally deaf.
Jesse?
Also, maybe consider that your vision, your mission, and your value statements don't align exactly with the company that you're working for. And maybe there are other companies or a company that you yourself could build that are more aligned with your vision, your mission, and your value statement.
I'm just going to add this. I remember the more I worked with senior executives at the top of organizations, the more I realized how little I understood about what they actually did. Down on the line, you're seeing all sorts of problems. You're thinking, why can't they do this? And boy, if I could just talk to them, I could get them to fix this. As you go up the organizational chain, you get to interact with higher level officials, you find that they have a ton of other influences on their decision making that may have little or nothing to do with the problems that you're seeing down at the bottom. Famously, I remember a circumstance I mentioned here before where I was talking to the CEO and he said, yeah, we're getting hammered on Wall Street. The only thing I can really be concerned about right now is our share price. If every action I don't take affects share price, I'm going to get in trouble down the line. And so I then would hear discussions from somewhere in the org chart, not at that level, and they were trying to solve things that had nothing to do with that. And I remember a little voice in the back of my head said, well, that's not going to happen. Why? Because it doesn't align with what's happening at the top of the organization. And the top has way more responsibility, and the people at the bottom don't have the information to understand why some of those top line decisions are being made the way they are. Now, this isn't always true, and I'm not saying that every time you don't know better than the CEO or the president about this little niche of things. And to have a system where those better ideas can percolate up is a big part of making businesses run well. But it's not easy. Decisions are not always easy at the top, and there are a lot of factors that you may not know about that goes into why those aren't being made the way you think they might. So all you can do is, my suggestion is, if you can learn to foster mentorships and you can get an ear that's friendly to you, that is higher up the chain, and quietly start a series of lunches or meetings or whatever, communication, maybe you can get more insight into those, and maybe they will identify you as someone who's interested in those more top line things and help you ascend the ladder. That I've also seen happen. Mentorships can be very powerful in business. Let's move to the next level.
Douglas Carmichael writes in that you think that RTO is as much of a communication magic bullet as its advocates say.
I'm not sure what you mean by RTO there. Return on, I don't know.
Let me jump in here.
This jargon
recovery.
thing?
Yeah. So, Douglas, if you're talking about recovery time objective, that is
return to office.
Return to office, RTO.
Return to office.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
see,
that is a technical thing that like only network people know about, and like,
well, it's not network. It's downsizing and upsizing in the end of the pandemic, and return to office being a big. When do you force your people to come back in? It's a huge and important topic. And
I love the analogy of a magic bullet, because we all know that it is predicated upon the Kennedy assassination, of the fact that bullets don't take this trajectory, and as such it's one of these like twisted metaphors that it ends up in idiom land for me immediately.
Well, I always think it in terms of the medical industry, that people are looking for, here's a tumor. Do we have a magic bullet drug that will go kill that tumor and not bother the rest of the health of the patient? So now that I get the context, and Nigel has some thoughts. Nigel?
So two things. First of all, what just happened then was a good example of using an acronym which produces bad communication, because I thought recovery time objective as well. So I was actually trying to work out what that meant as well. So be careful of your acronyms, your the words that you use, whatever your local language, in your written communication, so that the message there. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether it's going to be a magic bullet, but here's my biggest concern about the opposite, which is the remote working. That I think if you are late in your career and you are very established and your value is very clear, it's very easy for you to work from home, because you are more important to your employer than they are to you. If you are early in your career, are building a career, you need mentors, you need coaches, you need to be in the flow of the business. And you are they are more important to you than you are to them. So don't confuse yourself and where you are in your career with where more senior people who've established their value are. You will not build a career. You will not end up as the director, the vice president, the general manager, except in very exceptional circumstances, without being in the flow. And the flow is in the office.
Amen to that. I think that's been my experience exactly. Let's go to the next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana writes in, Disney used to get applauded for training their people in the Disney way. What companies do a great job of communicating their values both inside and outside today?
Jesse, start us off.
I know that anecdotal evidence is not admissible in a court of law, but every experience I've had with Black Magic Design employees has been exactly in tune with what I'd expect from a company that produces their products. I have opened up help tickets that they have checked back in on like a month, 2 months, 3 months later, just seeing if I was if the fix was implemented well, and if it continued to work in the way that they and I expected it to work.
And Nigel, close us out.
When I used to call on customers, somebody gave me the advice, look at the reception of the office building you are walking into. You can deduce everything about the culture of that company from its reception. Is it sterile? Is it warm? Is it welcoming? Does it make it easier? That is now true of the website, of the customer service hotline, and all communications that you have. Think of the reception when you next meet a company, go into a retail store. Think about what that says. I think there are some companies that do this quite well. I think Blackmagic is a good example. I would have to tell you, Apple is a good example. I think increasingly Disney is not a good example. And I think Disney is not a good example because it seems to me, at least in some of their movie franchises, they have lost synchronization with their audience. One of the best examples to me, and I appreciate that, Chris should be here and tell me this is the third rail thing, is the Bud Light thing. Regardless of the politics of that, you've got to ask, was the communication they did an adjacent or within the line of the people they were trying to communicate with? And the answer was they weren't. They were outside it. And that's about synchronizing who you are with your audience and who the message is. And when you do that well, it's very successful. And when you do it badly, there's a huge disconnect.
Yeah, I would imagine that the phone lines in that organization burned up for weeks, if not months, trying to manage an out of left field thing like that. Jason Bates, you had some thoughts?
Plus one on Blackmagic Design, all the way from the CEO down, every personal in real time, in real space interaction, including my calls to customer service and my emails. I'm thoroughly impressed with how well they handle what must be a deluge of new business, even since the ATEM, because the culture has had to change. They've had to scale up quite a bit, and they've really managed to keep their quality control in check. No, I lost my last one, so that's all I got.
All right, that's fair. We're getting close to the end of things now, and a couple of notes here. We may close a minute or two early, and that's fine. Don't forget, tomorrow should be really, really interesting. Sketching in 3D, the Feather app. Again, we were on the show floor, and I don't think it was Cinegare. I think somebody noted to me that it was one of the other shows, and I can't even see that now in my list of things. SIGGRAPH. Okay, so we were on the floor of the show at SIGGRAPH, and this was a wow moment. I know Alex was really fascinated with this in terms of real-time, three-dimensional sketching. And when you think about that process of not just working in height and width, but also depth and the ability to instantaneously rotate and sketch depth cues into your just doodling for all intents and purposes. I'm sure it goes farther than that. We'll know about that tomorrow. But that's our topic for tomorrow. We'll be talking about 3D sketching and the use of touch devices. And we'll have both the chief engineer and the community manager on tomorrow to talk and demonstrate the project. So if you're interested in that at all, tomorrow's a great day for you. I'm not sure what's happening Wednesday. I don't think I was able to find a cue for that. On Thursday, however, on our normal video day, Calvin Roberts is going to be here. Sounds like really a fascinating person, former paratrooper. It notes here he's done video production on 5 continents and time zones in war zones, worked on feature films and more. So he has a wealth of experience, particularly under stressful circumstances. I mean, every set to a certain degree is stressful because you're trying to get content and you've got a bunch of people gathered together and you're trying to do your job before you break apart. But that should be a brilliant masterclass in how somebody who's successfully done this under the most difficult circumstances possible. So we're looking forward to that Thursday here on the show. And now just our thank yous. And these are important. Every day, this whole village gets together, and the village is full of people who are putting their time and effort into helping you learn things. And we're very proud of what we do here every day. We're proud of the fact that we get this village together. There's a plenty of people who really deserve way more credit than they actually get on the show every day. But we try to acknowledge at least 3 of the biggest groups. Our producers, that's everybody who asks questions in the show. Those of you who have joined the Office Hours community and help us drive this process by putting your questions in. Thank you. Every day you come through with these brilliant questions that generate fascinating, at least I find them, totally fascinating discussions. And I come away from here every day knowing more than I showed up with. And boy, if that isn't a plus for why I do something, nothing is. So the panelists are one of those tripod legs. Of course, the crew in the back end, unbelievable efforts to make this happen every day. A group from all over the planet shows up to get this happening, and we appreciate each and every one of them. And the panelists, the people who show up here every day, more or less, fewer people depending on how things show up, but every day we get a wealth of experience from people who are just volunteering, saying, I'll show up and I will open up and I will try to help everybody coming up figure out how to do this stuff more efficiently, more successfully. And I can't tell you how many friends I've made out of this group. There's just absolutely fabulous people. And I feel like it's a real privilege to be able to sit here in this panel every day, listen and learn, and hopefully help make things happen for this. Right after we're done here, of course, Office Hours goes 24/7. We are on the cusp of our IBC coverage. So I believe it's Saturday that the whole show comes live. I may be wrong about that, but IBC starts this weekend and then runs into the early days of next week. It is very much like NAB. For those of you who aren't familiar with IBC, it's the big international broadcast convention in Europe, happens in Amsterdam. So we will be there in Amsterdam on the show floor. We'll get to take a look at what IBC looks like and learn about all the hot new stuff. And since we're coming well now out of the pandemic things and manufacturing is up and new equipment and products are being designed and now are finally in the production flow, we should be able to get a great look at what's coming down the pike. So join us for all of our IBC con stuff. I think there's also stuff happening in after hours, kind of like daily, as well as the show portions of it. So do check out the website. Look for our signals for IBC coverage if you're interested in that. And again, I think it's going to take over the show at least once, maybe twice over the course of the next few days. More on that coming up. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
If you ever really want to get freaked out, call Bose customer service. You don't get any computer. It's, "Hi, this is Bose. My name's Mike." And I go, "Wait, what? Mike, are you a computer? None of this fake Comcast computer clicking sound." Mike just answers the phone.
I got stuck in that. Oh, dear. Yeah. I burned an hour the other day in one of those phone systems, and I had to do it, and I hated it.
I bought a remote control I didn't need from Mike because I was so shocked.
Jesse, thanks for being here. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to have you on board.
It's good to be back. The demands of parenting and the growing business were just too much